Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name, Kerry Stevenson. Today, I've asked Siobhan Lancaster, Managing Director of 92 Energy, to come back and have a chat to us. They're drilling for high-grade uranium in the Athabasca. I do love that name, the Athabasca Basin, up there in Alaska, Canada. Canada. I don't know why I said Alaska, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry about me. It's not even Friday. Now, before we get started on 92 Energy, Siobhan's got a view on the uranium industry and nuclear as an energy supply source. And you know what? Here in Australia especially, we are seeing serious effects of the rise in electricity prices. A lot of commentary about renewables. I've always loved nuclear as an energy source because it is zero carbon emissions and it could be the answer to a lot of challenges in the future. Siobhan, great to see you. Welcome back to Small Caps.
Thanks very much for having me, Kerry. It's always great to be here again and talking with you about these great topics, including 92 Energy and the nuclear market.
And that's what I want to start with. If you don't mind, can we start with the nuclear market? Because I think a lot of people don't fully understand the impact, for example, on the spot price of uranium against companies like yourselves, like 92 Energy, and how that can impact you. But before I get into that, what's your view on the macro outlook for uranium going forward?
Look, I think the uranium fundamentals are the best we've ever seen. Certainly I was around in the last cycle and there was a lot of conversation back then about the potential impact of nuclear and the significant benefits that nuclear have. But 10 years down the track, we're seeing huge advancements in technology with small modular reactors. And we're really seeing the world really starting to pay attention to how they're going to decarbonize. So, of course, we've had the situation in Germany with their energy crisis that they've had recently. And that's really put a spotlight on how renewables alone really can't solve this decarbonisation problem that the world is having. And so what you're seeing is a massive pivot away from sort of governments chasing the renewable dream alone, I should say, and really going, well, how are we going to achieve decarbonisation and have 24/7 baseload energy, which is cheap energy, it's secure energy, and then we're not going to have to rely on other people for importing things like gas, for example, as a transitionary energy. So I think we've seen Germany really put a spotlight on this, and they're a real example of how really investing trillions of dollars in renewables alone really hasn't solved the problem for them. In fact, it's increased the amount of carbon emissions that they've had. They've shut down their nuclear power plants, as many of us would know, and they've done this at the same time, of course, where gas prices have gone up and the electricity prices coming out of Germany have been absolutely extraordinary. So really, governments around the world are starting to pay attention. You're seeing, China really come out hard. They're looking at building nuclear power at a rate of knots. In fact, their nuclear power plant fleet will be larger than the whole world's combined if they meet their plans, which I suspect they will. India is going heavy into it. You've got a lot of Eastern Europe who are really going hard into nuclear. And of course, France is already 70% nuclear, and they've recently announced that they're reinstating that policy around really decarbonising with nuclear. And France is a beautiful case in point, because really it took them 20 years to decarbonise their whole electricity grid and become 70% nuclear. So it's very fascinating and interesting to watch.
And I think that there's a really interesting app, isn't there, which shows the different ways that energy is consumed around the world.
Yeah, this is an absolutely fascinating app, Kerry. It's called Electricity Maps. And I'm just going to give everyone a demo, because what it basically shows, and what I think it really assists governments to realise, is that to get to green, you've either really got to have hydro or you've got to have nuclear power. So you can see Finland here that we're just hovering on. They're using all of their nuclear power here. They've got 4 gigawatts installed, or a bit beyond that. And they've got huge amounts of installed wind capacity, which they're obviously not using because it's obviously not windy, and a bit of solar, which they're obviously not using because it's not it's nighttime there. So that's a perfect example of how you can decarbonize your grid. They've got 37% renewables and 96% low carbon. So unfortunately, nuclear is not considered a renewable. It's considered low carbon instead. Another great example, of course, is France. And you can see France is green, and they decarbonised many years ago using nuclear, and 70% of their electricity is actually nuclear power, right? So this makes them one of the greenest producers of electricity in Europe. You can see they're using 20 grams of carbon intensity at the moment, 98% low carbon. And they've got a bit of wind installed, but they're using quite a bit of that wind installed capacity because it's obviously windy there. And once again, solar, sun doesn't shine at night. So perfect example of how solar is intermittent and doesn't work. And then we go to our friends here in Germany, who are the perfect case of what not to do in terms of electricity policy. So what they've done is they've really backed renewables, and there's nothing wrong with backing renewables. It's great. The problem is they haven't got a low carbon baseload energy source anymore. So they got rid of their nuclear. They've got no installed nuclear capacity, huge amounts of solar and wind. So this has cost them trillions of dollars. And where are they getting their baseload from? They're getting it from coal, and they're getting it from gas. So this is electricity, of course, that you have to import from other areas of the world, and it fluctuates in price. And now we're seeing that Germany, of course, has some of the most expensive electricity in the world. So it's very interesting for governments to sort of have a look at this and what to do and what not to do in terms of France versus Germany.
I could get quite addicted to that, Siobhan, just quietly. I find that really interesting, and it's a good case for nuclear. But let's talk about, if we could briefly, just before we get on to 92 Energy, because you've got a great project up there in Canada, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But let's talk price briefly, if we can.
Sure.
Because right now it's about 56 a pound. Back in the day, it was 130, but I want to leave it to you. You're the expert. Talk to us about price and how that potentially leverages to companies like yourself, like 92 Energy.
Yeah, sure. So actually the uranium price is one of the best performing commodities in the market. So when we listed 2 years ago, it was at $39 a pound, and now we're sitting at $56 a pound. So it's a significant increase of almost 50% in the price of uranium. And that has been just gradually going up. So in the last uranium cycle, of course, you would have heard that there was a very pivotal point where the uranium price actually overshot and went to $130 a pound. And that's because of the slow moving nature of the market. And that's really what I think we're going to see in this instance here once again. So what we've got at the moment is a massive fundamental disjoint between the supply and demand. And that's been caused by 10 years lack of exploration and development. So you have a situation where basically the demand for nuclear, which you can easily count up by the number of nuclear power plants out there, the demand is currently in excess of the supply, the primary supply hitting the market at the moment. So eventually that's going to be really shown out through prices. I think it's pretty easy to say that the consensus pricing for uranium is, sitting somewhere between $60 and $80 a pound. And this is based on all the experts out there. And it's really not very far off where we are, that $60 a pound mark. So we're at $56 a pound. It's moved quite significantly from $49 a pound to $56 a pound in the space of a couple of months. And I think we can easily see that again in a very quick period of time. And of course, the last time the uranium price, there was a little episode last year where it hit above $60 a pound. 92 Energy share price had a massive run off the back of that, because the $60 a pound seems to be this amount that the market is really looking for. So I think we're going to see that soon, and it could happen very quickly. And of course, 92 Energy is extremely leveraged to that when that price movement will happen in the future.
And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, you all know Rick Rule is somebody that I've spoken to in the past. He is very bullish on uranium, not just as a source for energy, but he says that companies like yourselves, the leverage that you're going to have going forward. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. I just want people to understand. Let's go back on it again. Zero carbon emissions, and we have an electricity or an energy crisis globally. I think government's going to start to wake up. What's your view?
Oh, look, absolutely. It's already happening. You're already seeing France, who, recently had a meeting in Europe on nuclear power, and they're really trying to change the way even the Europeans view renewables versus carbon-free energy. So they're really trying to push the carbon-free energy, which includes nuclear, of course. Sweden has just reclassified what they want in terms of their carbon-free baseload energy. So nuclear is now within that mix as well. So you're really starting to see this in mainland Europe, but then you're also starting to see it, all around the world with changes in government policy in France, in Korea, in China, in Japan. Japan, of course, just restarted all their fleet, or they're about to restart their fleet. And of course, they're looking at new builds as well. So that's really fascinating. So you're just really seeing the whole world really start to embrace nuclear power. And I think we'll start to see conversation start to dribble into the media in Australia. We already have over the last year or two, but certainly as electricity prices become something that's really hitting our back pockets, and our desire to decarbonise is going to become part of the conversation again, for sure.
So let's get ahead of the conversation and talk about 92 Energy.
Yeah, for sure.
Athabasca Basin, it's some of the highest grades of uranium in the world. Siobhan, talk to us about where you're at the moment and why you're getting pretty excited about the future for 92 Energy.
Well, look, 92 Energy has had an extraordinary start to its life. We had a discovery on our fourth drill hole ever, as you would already know. And we've been just drilling out that discovery ever since. So we just finished up our winter drill program a few months back. We got the assays results fairly recently, and that included a 10% hit, so half a metre at 10%, which is 100,000 ppm. These grades are massive.
I don't know.
Good. Yeah. So, if you're going to compare that to some of the Namibian grades, they average about 500 ppm. So 100,000 ppm is very good. The average grade of the ore body is much higher than the average grade of the global uranium that is mined. So it's looking really good, and we're really excited. We're getting back out there very shortly, and we'll be drilling into those high grade areas, really looking to expand that known mineralization, but also looking at these new areas that we drilled along trend, some of which returned uranium mineralization. So we'll be really getting into those areas to see whether there's some new zones there or whether it's continuation of the existing mineralization. So it's pretty exciting days for 92 Energy. And I think the thing that investors, need to understand is not only are you going to get the uranium pricing upside, but you're potentially going to get massive exploration upside as well off the back of this. And so with a market cap of $35 million, it makes it look quite good for investors, I would think, at this point in time.
Well, it's interesting timing, but I really want to find out about when you first got this project, and you just mentioned, was it 100,000 ppm?
Yes.
You've been in this industry for a while, Siobhan. You've taken companies from very small to billion-dollar companies. Has that surprised you to the upside? When you first got your hands on this, I think you probably thought the Athabasca Basin has got the highest grade uranium deposits in the world. What did you think? Is this, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, do you think the market fully understands that these grades have surprised even you?
Look, I think the Athabasca has some very high grade discoveries. So whilst we're hitting really high grades, they're not the highest in the Athabasca, but they're still very good, and they're still near surface, and they're still far higher than the global average. So these are things that we need to consider. This is looking like a really nice deposit. We just need to do some more drilling and get out there and really, get that drill bit moving again. So, it's exciting times ahead. Not many companies are drilling drilling something that's, decent, which we are.
Okay, so our audience, they're an audience of investors. There's lots of noise out there, if you like. And I'm talking to you in July of 23. What does the program look like for the rest of 23? What do you think are the milestones that are going to get investors, shareholders excited about what you're doing?
Look, I mean, I think this upcoming drill program is going to be very exciting, and we'll be putting out results based on our downhole probes. So as we actually drill, which is kind of exciting, in most cases you have to wait for the assays, so there's not that delayed timing. Of course, we will put assays out after that as well. We're just looking to expand that mineralized zone. So that's really what we're looking to achieve. Some more good drilling results is really what we're after.
Is that for the rest of 2023, though? It's all about drilling and expanding the resource?
Exactly.
All right. So if we were to look at the exploration upside, is this all, I think you said it might be part of the same system, but it might not be. Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, so look, basically Gemini is a massive area, and we have not even scratched the surface. So we're just looking at a trend, which is a 2 by 2 kilometer trend. It's got an eastern limb and it's got a western limb. We haven't even been over to the western side of the limb yet. The eastern side of the limb, we've really only touched the bottom 250 meters. So we've still got, 1.5 kilometers to the north to go. So there's tremendous exploration upside just in the direct area that we're looking at. But of course, this is now sitting along a trend that has potentially a lot more exploration beyond that. So it's an exciting place to be. And, this has sort of been an area that was quite overlooked for a long time in the Athabasca Basin. We've really just reopened it up to everyone. So.
Well, speaking of that and reopening it up, talk to us about, the infrastructure around there, the accessibility. Have you got good infrastructure, got good workers and skill bases around there?
Yeah, sure. So, look, it is 60 kilometres in from the main highway.
Right.
Yeah, which is all right. We have a winter road that goes in there during summer because it gets a bit muddy. We actually tend to do helicopter assisted programs. So it's about 60 kilometres from the main highway. It's not tremendously far from 2 existing mills. So it's right in that eastern part of the Athabasca, which has several mills around it for processing uranium, and so that's a good position to be in. And yeah, so it's in the right jurisdiction and area is how I would describe it.
And what about the government of Canada? Are they looking at what you're doing? Because are they very pro-uranium, pro what you're doing?
Yeah, look, it's a really important point that you're raising. Jurisdiction is really important when it comes to uranium. You really want to be in North America or Australia, in those known uranium jurisdictions, and particularly as nuclear power becomes sort of really something of security that the US and Canada are after in terms of their own electricity security. You'll find that it's a strategically important position that we're in and jurisdiction that we're in.
Almost sounds like it's becoming a critical mineral.
Well, it is a critical mineral, actually, Kerry.
Is
it's
it?
Not almost one, it is. Yes, absolutely.
There you go. I'm learning every day, ladies and gentlemen. Is it really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think I knew that. All right, Siobhan, talk to us about this if you wouldn't mind. You know how I like to wind these up and say, all right now as I'm talking to you, July 2023, why should people be sitting up and taking notice of 92 Energy right now?
Well, I think the first thing is that the uranium market is definitely, on the way up. It's not on the way down, it's on the way up, and it's going to keep marching towards the end of the year. So that's the first point. I think secondly, we're highly leveraged to that uranium price. And thirdly, I think we've got a fantastic exploration program ahead of us. We'll hopefully be drilling some more high-grade uranium and be putting lots of great results out for our audience during a period of time, which hopefully the macro theme is a lot better than what it has been.
And you're one that knows about the macro theme. I just need to ask you one last question. When do you think those results will be out? Can you tell us, or?
Well, as we drill, so there's a sort of a delay in terms of you drill and then you have to, review everything. But yeah, it's pretty live as we start drilling. So as soon as we get back out there, you'll start to see results within sort of 3 weeks of those drilling.
Okay, so when are you getting out there? Sorry, brain not working.
So we're hoping to get out there in August and to do a 1-month program.
Fantastic. Siobhan, always fantastic to talk to you. And thank you so much for that macro outlook as well, because it's always interesting when you understand the macro and the demand that's going to be coming for uranium in the future. And as Siobhan said earlier, the leverage that they get once that uranium price starts to move, and it looks like it's going to be very interesting times ahead. So check them out. ASX code is 92E, and Siobhan Lancaster, she's the Managing Director. Thanks so much for joining me on Small Caps today.
Thanks, Kerry.